नमस्कार शिक्षार्थियों, आज के सेशन में आप सभी का स्वागत है। आज हम पढ़ेंगे मेथड्स ऑफ साइकोलॉजी, जो कि सेकेंडरी लेवल का चैप्टर है। तो आज सबसे पहले हम इसके ऑब्जेक्टिव्स डिस्कस कर लेते हैं। ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हमारे ये हैं, लेट मी गो थ्रू इट वंस टू यू ऑल। अंडरस्टैंडिंग डिफरेंट अप्रोचेस यूज्ड टू स्टडी साइकोलॉजिकल प्रोसेसेस। सबसे पहले हम बात करेंगे क्या क्या डिफरेंट अप्रोचेस हैं जो कि हमें बहुत सारे जो हमारे साइकोलॉजिकल प्रोसेस हैं उनको समझने में हमारी हेल्प करती हैं। देन वी विल डिस्कस द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ साइकोलॉजिकल रिसर्च। क्योंकि हमें बहुत सारे प्रोसेसेस पढ़ने हैं, उनको एक्सप्लोर करना है, तो उसके लिए हमें कुछ रिसर्च मेथड्स की ज़रूरत पड़ेगी अंडर साइकोलॉजी। तो हम एक साइकोलॉजिकल रिसर्च के क्या कैरेक्टरिस्टिक हैं, व्हाट मेक्स अ साइकोलॉजिकल रिसर्च अ गुड रिसर्च, we'll discuss that as well. Then we'll discuss different methods to understand psychological processes such as observation, experimentation, case study, survey, etc. So here we'll be discussing about the methods that are used to study the psychological processes, and these methods are observation, experimentation and survey. So next we'll discuss different psychological tools जैसे psychological tests, interview, questionnaire. So basically what happens is under psychological methods we study the different methods such as observation, कि एक behavior को study करने के लिए हम क्या process use करते हैं, that is observation या method कह लीजिए। अब इस method में हम क्या क्या चीज़ें involve करते हैं वो हमारे हो जाते हैं psychological tools. So now we will start with the introduction first. So psychology has various methodological ways or approaches to understand and explain psychological phenomena. So there are multiple number of approaches, as psychology is an old field. It's more than 100 years old now. So इसलिए there has been lot of advancement and development in the field, and there are various approaches to understand even a single process. There are multiple approaches that can be used to study a single behavior. Next, in order to obtain responses from individuals, a number of psychological tools or instruments are used that we just discussed in the objectives as well, that to study any behavior or any process, we need tools and methods so that a proper objective study can be done and outcomes can be recorded. So we have certain psychological tools and instruments to get through this process. The responses taken on those tools constitute the basic data which are analyzed to study human experiences, mental processes and behavior. So whatever data we are taking, that is whatever response we are getting from the subject, वो हमारा बेसिक डेटा बनता है, and then the data that has been collected is used to study and analyze the various human experiences, processes and behaviors. So let's move forward with the approaches to study the psychological processes. So as just mentioned earlier, that there are various approaches in the field to study even a single behavior. So the first approach that we are going to focus on is the biological approach. It focuses on biological structures and their role in regulating feelings, memories, emotions and behavior. So here, biological approach is focusing on the brain, whatever biological structure a human body or an animal have comes under the biological approach. So here the focus is on how the brain functions, how our endocrine system functions, how our nervous system functions. So basically what happens is our brain is continuously functioning as we are thinking, as we are experiencing various events throughout the day. So there is a lot of biological action happening in our body. For example, neurotransmitters are getting secreted in our body throughout, and what all neurotransmitters are getting secreted when we are happy. So that when a person is studying that will be a biological approach. What are the neurotransmitters that are secreted when a person is sad? So that is also a biological approach aspect of a study. Next we have is psychoanalytic approach. So psychoanalytic approach is basically given by Sigmund Freud. So he was the pioneer of psychoanalytic approach and he is known as the father of this approach. His focus was on the unconscious libidinal energy to describe present state of the person. Basically, Sigmund Freud has done a lot of study on the unconscious aspects of human mind and how the unconscious mind affects our day-to-day behavior. So he studied various individuals. That was one specialty of Sigmund Freud's, that all the research that we have been given by Freud was collected through different case studies. So he never conducted a group study, but always studied an individual in a separate manner. So he focused on the unconscious libidinal energy, and then he gave layers of consciousness. So he was very much concerned about the hierarchical arrangement of the conscious energies that we have, or conscious processes that we have. So he described the consciousness in 3 different stages: conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious. So conscious is when we are aware of what is happening around us. So what all processes that are going in my brain or in my surroundings, and if I am aware of them, that is conscious. तो इसको हम example से अगर समझे तो ऐसे समझेंगे कि जैसे जब मैं ये line पढ़ती हूँ, he gave layers of consciousness, so I am reading it. So when I am reading it, I am conscious of what all is given on the screen and what I am supposed to focus on. So I am conscious about the information that I am reading. So this is conscious, when you are aware. Then pre-conscious. Pre-conscious is kind of a bridge between conscious and unconscious. Pre-conscious is basically when you are not aware about something. For example, if you had an ice cream yesterday, so it is a past event now, but next day on the same time you remember that, oh, I had ice cream yesterday on the same time. So this memory was in your brain, but it was saved somewhere else, and through pre-conscious, on the same time, this memory came forward into your conscious mind and you became aware of the memory. So this is what pre-conscious does. What all is saved in your brain is like, so pre-conscious takes it out and forward it to conscious in case you want to reconsider it or to think about it. Then we have is unconscious, the third stage. So unconscious is basically the information that we have experienced or we have seen somewhere, but we kind of ignore it, or not even ignore it, we kind of store it and forget it. Like forget it in the sense you save it in a folder and you never access it. So that is unconscious. But what happens is, Freud basically said that majority of human behaviors are triggered by unconscious motivation, because we are not aware of what all is there in our brain, what all we have saved and what all we have forget. So all these are saved in the unconscious mind, and this unconscious mind is the major part of, so basically it is a major aspect of our behavior in our day-to-day life as well. So for example, our various motives to basic, so let's understand this with an example. So Freud has said that majority of human behaviors are triggered by unconscious motivation. So for example, if I was sitting in a park and a dog earlier bit me in the park, I was very little at that time, say for example 4-year-old maybe. So when I was that little, a dog bit me and I was sitting in the park. So what happened, as I grew up, as I came to, like for example, I reached the age of 10 or 12, I started to maintain distance from parks and dogs both. So because I was so little that I was not able to express the event particularly in a good manner, because language is not developed like that for a 4-year child. So what happened is that event went into my unconscious mind, and this unconscious mind, मेरी ये जो memory save हुई of a dog biting me in the park, what happened is as I grew up 10 or 11 years old, I started being away, I started avoiding the parks and dogs, And when somebody asked me, ki, why are you not going to the park? I said, I don't like going to the park. So what happened is, there was a certain different motive, a certain different event that happened, and this motive came forward, but I am unaware of it. Though my unconscious have this memory, but I am not able to access it. And this is why he said that majority of, basically Freud said that majority of human behaviors are triggered by unconscious motivation. Next, we are going to understand the humanistic approach. So humanistic approach is basically given by Carl Rogers. He was the father of this approach. It assumes, the approach, humanistic approach, assumes that a person is an active and self-actualizing agent and has a choice in deciding his behavior. So humanistic approach basically talks about that human beings do have a free will. They are not just some computer, or not just a person who just experience an event and repeat it if they like it, and if they don't like it, they avoid it. Humanistic approach is kind of contrary to various schools of psychology. Here, Carl Rogers assumed that each and every person has their own will. They have the freedom to decide. They always make choices. And they, basically Carl Rogers also said that if we want to actually influence a human being, we need to provide them with unconditional positive regard and giving them an environment where they feel independent and they feel free to make a choice. Because as a human being, if we put in the thought that, okay, you are just going to experience the event and you have no choice, that will actually paralyze our decision making, and it might be that later on we become so dependent on somebody else to decide our life that we can't even decide on when to eat, what to drink. So even that will hamper. So that is why Carl Rogers said that we are an active being and we have the free will, and we have a choice whenever we are in a situation to decide anything. Next we have is the behaviorist approach. The father of this approach is J.B. Watson, and what, according to J.B. Watson, the unit of analysis for this approach is explicit, objective and overt behavior and its relationship with the environmental stimulation. So basically J.B. Watson said that to understand a human being, we have to understand the overt behavior, overt as in the behavior that is visible to us. Whereas in the previous approaches like the psychodynamic, psychoanalytic approach and the biological approach, we were talking about the internal happenings, the biological processes, the experiences and the unconscious mind. Whereas J.B. Watson said that whatever is visible to the human eye should be observed, and our study should be based on the visible stimulus only. So he said the unit of analysis for this approach is explicit, explicit as in something that is outright visible to you, objective because you are not adding your interpretation or any kind of other information into the data or study, overt behavior as I just explained, what all a person is able to show you. So for example, as I am currently reading this line, I am using my hand movements, I am basically moving my neck here and there to go from this point to this point. There is eye movement happening. So these eye movements are called saccadic eye movement. So when I read this, I start from explicit and then dheere dheere I move my neck aage and I read this line. So this is overt behavior. This is something that everybody is able to see, and its relationship with the environmental stimulation and how it is influencing the environment. All the three things, explicit, objective, overt behavior, how they are influencing the environment. Then next we have is the cognitive approach. It focuses on the study of information processing capacity of the individual in terms of perception, remembering, thinking, language, reasoning, problem solving and decision making, which are called higher mental processes. So we have talked about cognitive approach previously as well. So cognitive is from the word cognition. Cognition is related to our brain activity, which involves thinking, as just mentioned, thinking, language, problem solving. All these activities are called higher mental processes. Why? Why are these called higher mental processes? Because our each and every activity of the day is influenced by these activities. If, for example, somebody asks me ki let's go to watch a movie. So now it's on me. They have given me the information. Now I will process that okay, this person has asked me to go for a movie, but do I really want to go? What time is the movie? I want to know. If it is appropriate, I'll go. If I don't find the timing appropriate, I might not. So for each and single experience, all these aspects are involved and they help us in our day-to-day functioning. So for example, if a person is not able to think, the person will not be able to function as well. So what happens? So if a person is not able to think, we usually call them as कि आप robot हो क्या? तो ये चीज़ क्यों हमने ऐसे बोली? क्योंकि रोबोट के पास हायर मेंटल प्रोसेसेस की कैपेसिटी नहीं है. हायर मेंटल प्रोसेसेस आर यूनिक टू ह्यूमन बीइंग एंड दैट्स व्हाट मेक्स अस मोर ह्यूमन. So that was about cognitive approach. Next, we are going to discuss the psychological characteristics of psychological research basically. So a psychological research carried out scientifically has following characteristics. First is objectivity, which is they are free from any kind of biases. So what all I see or whatever I feel, I put it as it is. I don't put in extra information into it, or I don't put my interpretation into it. How does that help in a research? So when a researcher is not objective, they might show partiality, they might show biases in their behavior, and while they are recording the data, they might influence the research as the research further moves on. So that's why objectivity is very important with the perspective of a researcher to keep the study appropriate and standard. Next, testable. The research should be testable. It can be tested time and again by any researcher. So basically what testable means is if a research was conducted say 15 years back, 15 साल पहले किसी रिसर्च को किया गया, तो जब कोई उसे 15 साल बाद कर रहा है तो उसमें रिविजन तो हो सकता है, लेकिन ऐसा ना हो कि आपकी रिसर्च का जो आउटकम था वो ही कुछ और आया और अब वो नहीं आ रहा है जब कोई और कर रहा है. तो इट शुड बी टेस्टेबल इन द सेंस आपने जो भी टेस्ट किया है जब कोई दूसरा व्यक्ति उसे करे तो वो भी उतना ही इक्वली एबल होना चाहिए उस चीज़ को टेस्ट करने में. इट कैन बी टेस्टेड टाइम एंड अगेन बाय एनी रिसर्चर. इट्स नॉट दैट कि सिर्फ आपने कंडक्ट की है तो आप ही उस रिसर्च को दोबारा करेंगे, नहीं. It can be that somebody else also might choose the same topic and use your research study to understand the methodology, to understand how you have recorded the data. All that should be testable. Next, self-correction. That is, any research study should be open for correction and revision. So for example, I just said that if somebody is conducting a study that happened 15 years back, so there can be revisions. So there might be certain changes in the environment by that time, and there might be some new findings in the research study. So the original researcher should have the capacity to take the correction and revision as well. They should not be rigid, नहीं जो मैंने किया है वही final है. No, you should be open to correction and revision as well. Next is replication, which means that results are verified by similar studies. So if somebody else is conducting the same study again, the research results should somewhat be on the similar lines. So for example, if a teacher conducted a learning experiment in a classroom of say 50 students and he tested one method. For example, he or she, teacher can be of any gender. So they tried a learning method. They said ki board pe if I write something and I make the students see time and again, so they will be able to store it better and for a longer period of time. So in a group of 50 students, the result was that yeah, okay, this method is helpful in learning. So next time some other researcher thought of doing the same method on say 10 students. So it should not be that okay, this study was applicable on 50 students, but it is not applicable on 10 students. How is that possible? You are using the same learning method and you are using students, 10 students, it's a group of students. It might be that it did not work for one person or two person, but if an earlier research study had shown, okay, this strategy worked, then the next research study should also be on the similar lines. If they are contradictory, then somewhere there has been some error in one of the studies. May it be the 50 student study or may it be the 10 student study, and that's where self-correction and revision comes. So these were the characteristics of psychological research. Next we have the methods. So next we are understanding the methods to understand psychological processes, in which we are going to study observation. So observation is our first method. Observational methods entail the observation and description of a subject's behavior. So here what we do in observation is basically, if I have folded my hands like this, so as a unbiased observer, you or somebody else who is observing my behavior need to write that, okay, this person has folded their, or maybe it can be very detailed also, that they kept their left hand downward and they kept their right hand on their left hand in a folded manner. So this is how you're gonna record each and every bit of the overt behavior that you are able to see. And if I put my hands like this, so you will not write that the person was thinking something. No, you will write that the person kept their right hand finger, index finger, on their temples. So these are temples. This is forehead, this is temples. So you will write that. So this is objectivity in your research method, and that helps us in avoiding the biases that we might introduce in the research study. Observation is a method of inquiry which requires systematic registering of events, which we just talked about, without any deliberate attempt to interfere with variables operating in the event which is being studied. So I just explained this, that it is a systematic approach to register the events and not manipulate or contemplate in any manner, not manipulate or interfere with the variables in any manner that might influence the outcomes of our study. Next, observation is the method which can be used in natural settings as well as laboratory settings. So natural settings mein when observation is done, it is called naturalistic observation. But when observation is done in laboratory settings, it is called laboratory observation. Based on the role of the observer, it is divided into two types, that is participant observation and non-participant observation. So participant observation is basically when the researcher themselves involve among the subjects of their observation, whereas in non-participant observation, the observer will sit back and observe the event and behavior as it is unfolding in the environment. Environment can be both natural or laboratory. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you so much.